another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
I'm Craig.
Today we decided to do another Jim Wynorski film. I treated Craig to Shopping Mall the last time we dove into this man's oeuvre.
Right.
And I thought I would treat him to what is actually, I have to admit, one of my all-time favorite horror movies.
Really?
Yes, Sorority House Massacre 2. Now, we did Pet Sematary, and you have fond memories of Pet Sematary.
Right.
It's linked with your childhood.
Sure.
So, picture, if you will, a teenage boy.
I was going to say, did you first see this when you were about 12, 13?
The age is very important.
Yeah.
Teenage boy with his friends, and we would get together for what we called stupid movie nights. And we've talked about this before, about how cool it is to walk through the old video stores and just look at the covers of things and rent them just based on the descriptions on the back and the ghoulish or weird pictures on the front. That was our tradition, basically, in high school. Friday nights, me and a couple of our friends would get together and we'd go out and rent these films. Now, remember, and it's not hard to go back to these times when you didn't have the internet.
Right.
You couldn't go to IMDb and see what other people thought of these films. You had no idea. So we rented what we thought was going to be a pretty straightforward horror film called Sorority House Massacre 2. And we watched it and we were totally shocked all the way through. Not only did it turn out to be the perfect stupid movie night movie, because the best stupid movie night movies are the movies you can make fun of.
Right.
But by the end of it, you realized, oh, they're in on the joke too. It's not a totally incompetent film. It's really trying to be what it is. It's almost not accidentally what it is, in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, hell yeah.
And again, this is back in a time before these self-aware, ironic horror films that we get that are just part and parcel of right now. So maybe through the lens of today, this film wouldn't give me such joy as it has given me throughout the years. So I have to preface all that with that in mind, because you gave me a look once I said this is one of my all-time favorites. But I get such a guilty pleasure from watching this movie, just the same way I get guilty pleasures from watching Godzilla or something like that. It's not because it's a well-made film. It's because it's a film that tickles a certain place in my heart.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I have movies like that too that, looking back, I know that they're not good movies, but I still, I have a fondness for them for nostalgic purposes or reasons or whatever. And I can definitely see why a group of 14-year-old boys would really enjoy this movie. Less so my cup of tea, but I can see that.
Well, I've revealed my love for Jim Wynorski, and it always has to come with sort of a caveat, a little asterisk by it, because he's a very prolific filmmaker in the low-budget film realm. I talked about it maybe a little bit when we were talking about Shopping Mall, but for those who might not have heard that episode, this guy grew up loving these, much like me, just loving and appreciating and enjoying these low-budget horror films of the 50s and 60s, particularly the ones that Roger Corman did. Mm-hmm. And his dream, basically, was to work for Roger Corman, and by gosh, he did it. Mm-hmm. So he came in a little later to the game, about late 80s to early 90s. His first film for Roger Corman's pictures was Not of This Earth, which was a remake of one of Roger Corman's earlier films from the 50s, but starring Tracy Lords.
Oh.
The very first non-pornographic, legitimate film role that Tracy Lords had was in Jim Wynorski's film, Not of This Earth. So, and that's not a bad movie. It's a little more straight than this is, but because it's a low-budget film, it shows it's a little, it's a little ragged around the edges. But it's very typical of Roger Film's output from the late 80s to early 90s, as is this movie. So it was produced by Corman. Corman gave a start to a lot of famous people. The list is just enormous, from Jack Nicholson to Ron Howard to James Cameron. All these people got their start in Roger Corman's shop cranking out these movies. So he ends up writing this horror script for this movie, Sorority House Massacre 2, which, by the way, has absolutely nothing to do with Sorority House Massacre 1.
So why? Okay, do you know? So why did they title it that? Is it just being ironic? Was it trying to? trying to, I don't know. I don't know if there was a fan base for part 1.
I honestly don't know that either. There's probably an answer out there if you look online. My guess is that, again, Sorority House Massacre 1 maybe came out a year or two before this, was moderately successful, and so they just, because you can use a title without permission, they just threw 2 on it.
Kind of piggybacked.
But yeah, this has nothing to do. If you watch Sorority House Massacre 1, I believe I saw it a while back. It was totally forgettable, but I couldn't even recall the plot to you. Has nothing to do with this movie. Interestingly enough, though, this movie does have some flashback scenes in them.
Right.
And the flashback scenes are not from Sorority House Massacre 1. They're from a movie which is interesting in its own right called Slumber Party Massacre. And there is a Slumber Party Massacre series with the Driller Killer, and I think the third one is really out there. It's got a guy with a guitar. He's like a dead goth kind of rocker guy, ghost thing that has a drill at the end of his guitar. And I don't know. You might have seen the cover for it because it was. Oh, it's an insane movie. But the Sorority House Slumber Party Massacre 1 was written by the famous feminist author Rita Mae Brown.
You're kidding.
I am not kidding you. So it's interesting. You should look up the history for that film as well. It's interesting that this feminist author would write this film, which is basically about a bunch of women in various states of undress getting killed. And then that, they must have gotten the rights to it. That's all I can say, to the footage, and it must have been pretty cheap. They used that instead of filming their own flashback footage.
Well, and it's funny because it's obvious, because as this guy is like giving the backstory of this house, these 5 sorority girls buy this old kind of rundown mansion, and they're going to make it their sorority house, and they get in there, it's all dilapidated or whatever, and then this creepy neighbor shows up, Orville Ketchum, and he's this big, fat, I hate to judge people based on their appearance, but he's a gross-looking guy, like all pockmarked and sweaty, and
got a big flannel shirt on, doesn't take care of himself,
like slack-jawed, like he's always got his mouth hanging open, and of course they are scared by him, but he comes in and he tells them this whole story about what had happened in this house 5 years ago, which is why it was so cheap and they were able to get it. They were all kind of aware that these murders had happened, but only one of them, the one who secured the house, knew that this was the actual house. And Ketchum comes over and tells them the whole story, and that's when the flashback happens, but you can tell that the narrative that he's telling doesn't match up with the flashbacks. Like, right. He says something like, first he killed his wife, and it's obviously like a co-ed, like a 20-something girl, then he's like, and then he killed his daughters. Again, more co-eds, exactly the same age as the girl who was supposed to be the mom, and it just, like, I guess it fits well enough, like, if you really care, but it's clear that the images you're seeing in the narrative he's telling are not one and the same. Yeah,
and it's funny. And the girls, even from the beginning, I think, acting is clearly not good.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's bad.
There's not a good actor in this whole film.
No.
They're all delivering their lines, and the script itself is a little silly, too.
Yeah.
Much like Chopping Mall, it has a lot of jokes deliberately written in. Most of them are corny.
Very corny. and the delivery makes it even more corny because it's not well acted, and so it just seems like really forced, poor acting that's laughable. I mean, you literally laugh out loud. It's so goofy.
Yeah, the jokes are goofy, then the laughing is goofy on top. Like they're reading them off of title cards or something on the side, right?
Yeah, I don't remember. There was something like, in the beginning, they're like,
see, the movers aren't coming till 6 a.m. in the morning. Same time the phone and the electric people are coming. Oh, come on. It'll be fun.
Will be.
Oh, just like camping out, only without all the bugs.
I don't know about that.
Oh, come on, girls. Look what we have here. We have, like, peanut butter, we have crackers, and we even have popcorn.
Just the silliest delivery of lines that... Oh, it's funny.
Yeah. Even before all this, it starts off with like a little mini flashback scene where the girl's sitting cowering in the corner. Linda, I believe, who's the Australian woman. I think at least that's what her accent seems to be.
Sounds like it.
You've got to try to remember. And then we get these girls, of course, coming up to the house with all the crazy dialogue. We have Jessica, who's the tallest of the group. Mm-hmm. She's played by Melissa Moore. Now, if you're familiar with films of this era, and if you watched a lot of USA Up All Night, probably, a lot of these kinds of films would come across. And Melissa Moore is kind of a standby in this arena. A bit of a scream queen from the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, she looked kind of familiar. I mean, and maybe she was just recognizable because she is so tall, especially against some of these other girls. Like, she kind of looms over them. She did. You know, I feel like she did, like you said, a bunch of those movies where it's cheerleaders with big boobs and, you know. That...
Exactly. Moderately attractive, not a knockout, but a cute girl.
Well, all these girls look like lingerie models.
Yes.
I mean, they've all got, you know, great big boobs, like huge boobs.
Whether they're real or not.
Right.
Some are clearly real, some are clearly not. You get to see them all.
Oh, all of them. Yeah, there's a segment, you know, after they decide that they're going to stay, they hold a seance to try to contact the killer from before. His name was, what was his name?
Clive Hochstetter.
Clive Hochstetter,
a name
right.
you'll hear a lot in this film.
Oh, yeah, they say it like every 2 seconds. I can't believe I couldn't remember. But they try to have a seance, which lasts all of about 20 seconds, but it's like when they say they want to try to contact him, the planchette or whatever it is, shoots off the board and into the fire. And they all scream, and Janie, the girl who found the house, was like, "Oh, the lightning must have hit the house and caused a big power surge." Okay.
And they're all like, "Oh, yeah, well, anyway."
Right. And then after that, there's probably a good at least 5 minutes montage of them just getting undressed, taking showers, you know.
This is charming point number one of this film for me, because I feel like this movie is a distillation of all the movies like it. It took all the movies like it and really brought it down to its core. It included all the necessary items and made no bones about it.
Right.
It wears its heart on its sleeve, and that is what I find so charming about this movie. Of course, you have to have the nudity, right? So instead of sprinkling the nudity throughout the movie or giving really good reasons for it, it's just all in a lineup. All in a row.
Yeah.
Scene one, girl's taking a really long shower.
She's like very sensuously like rubbing the soap like over her nipples. Like...
But even still, there are these squeaking noises put in. Like the soap is squeaking over her skin, and I mean, it's so funny.
It is funny, and there were silly little sound bites like that throughout. Like at one point, one of the girls, the little redhead girl, is rubbing Janie's back.
Oh, yeah.
And you hear like this big crack. Like it sounds like somebody like broke a huge stick in half, and the girl who's getting the back rubs like, that was the spot. Like just the silliest sound effects that don't make any sense that were clearly put in post. Oh, silly.
Yeah, it was silly.
And it was funny during that scene with them all, you know, taking their clothes off, getting in the shower, whatever. Usually in this type of movie, there's one girl who doesn't.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
There's usually one girl who is the modest one or who's nice or who you know is going to be the final girl, so she's not going to be the one who shows her boobs. Yeah. Not here.
No. No.
Every single one of them, you get nice, good look at their boobies.
Well, if you're familiar with Jim Wynorski's stuff, you can tell that he's way more interested in the TNA than almost anything else.
Well, and the stuff that he makes now, or at least some of it, is like softcore porn, right?
It really is, and that's actually kind of sad. I think you look at some of his earlier movies like this, and they have this charm about them, even though they're a little silly. There's kind of an innocence to them, in a way. There's a lot of nudity, but there's no sex.
Right.
And it's also... So like it just so obviously is made to appeal to teenage boys.
Yeah.
But really no more. You know what I mean? It's really zeroed in on that target market, because this is not something that like a heterosexual adult male in his our age or whatever is really going to get off on. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the thing. You know, it was a different time. We grew up in the 80s and we didn't have the internet. So like
that's true.
You know, I remember, staying up late, and it would be one of those things like, not only did you get to see boobies, but it was like you were doing something naughty that your parents didn't know about, and you were getting away with it.
Forbidden.
We weren't as exposed to as much graphic content as far as nudity and sex is concerned. I mean, there are times when I kind of thank God I'm not a parent, because I can't imagine to what lengths you would have to go to protect your children from seeing things that they shouldn't be seeing.
It's a whole new world, man. It's got to be totally impossible.
So I feel like this is kind of from a bygone era where they were kind of supplying a demand, people want to see boobies. Let's give them some boobies.
Well, and just taking your top off could sell a film.
Yeah.
You know, you would watch a movie like this just because, hey, the prospect of a few girls are going to get naked.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's not going to be graphic. I'm not going to see sex or whatever, but I'm going to see some boobs. And then some squeaky clean boobs.
Yeah. And then, not only do they all shower and, like, get dressed, but it's fun. They're, like, in this rundown. I mean, it's not that rundown, but it's dirty and, like, nobody's been in there for 5 years. There's cobwebs all over. They don't have any, like, beds or anything to sleep on, but when they get ready for the nighttime in bed, they all put on, like, their finest lingerie. Like, G-strings and, I don't even know.
It's the most uncomfortable looking stuff, like lingerie models.
And then they just run around in that for the whole rest of the movie.
Like it's nothing. I'm pretty sure that women don't actually do this when they have sleepovers.
That would be my guess.
But not according to this film. It's all thongs and G-strings. And
and this is what, you know, every adolescent boy wants to believe that girls do at sleepovers.
The only thing it was missing was a pillow fight.
Yeah, I was waiting for it.
That's if the only flaw in this movie for me is the lack of
or maybe a little girl on girl kissing or something like that.
A little curious.
And I almost thought we were going to get that at the back rubbing scene.
With the massage, right?
But I guess that was good enough.
Well, that one takes a turn for the worse. It sets up our very first conflict for the movie.
Right.
And that is a very awkwardly forced conflict where the girl giving the back rub, who is Suzanne, is giving the back rub to Janie. Suzanne is talking about some boy. I believe it was... Janie's like, where did you learn to give these back rubs? And Suzanne, a little something that I picked up from Billy McGuire. And she's like, Billy McGuire? Well, Billy McGuire and I kind of have a thing. And she's like, you don't have an exclusive on Billy McGuire. And then she gets up and runs out and storms out. I think I'm going to go downstairs and have a drink.
And the other girl's like, what did I do? Terrible dialogue. It's really funny.
So after being introduced to Orville Ketchum and him menacingly kind of looking in from across the street, and we had even a shot of him eating raw meat from
he's totally gross and a creeper.
Bowl. Yeah.
And then there's also this totally pointless side plot where there's a cop. And it doesn't even make any sense.
No.
He says you're just introduced out of nowhere to this cop and his partner, Mike and Phyllis or something like that.
Mike and Phyllis.
And they are like, they're headed somewhere, but then they get stopped because it's storming and it's raining, and I guess like the road is out or something.
The one road that leads to the Hochstetter place apparently has too much rain on it.
And he says, when Mike is explaining it to Phyllis, he's like,
that address you got tonight from dispatch?
6934 Langdon. But wait, you're not telling me that...
Afraid I am. It's the old Hochstetter place.
But Hochstetter's dead.
He is, but there was another guy, a neighbor.
Doesn't make any sense.
No.
Nobody called him from there. They don't even have a phone.
The phone is out.
Right.
Yes.
And then so like they investigate throughout, and he says, the cop said, and I say throughout, they have maybe, I don't know,
4 scenes.
Yeah,
maybe.
and they're really brief.
Maybe 3, actually.
And totally inconsequential. But he says something about, I always thought that Ketchum guy was in on it too. It's almost like they're trying really, really hard to get us to think that it's him, when it's obviously not. Like, know, like, they're trying to make him out to be so menacing that there's no way it's going to end up being him.
Right, it would be too obvious.
Right.
Yeah. And their acting is even worse, I think.
Yeah.
Actually, the girls sort of look like Academy Award-winning material compared to poor Phyllis and Mike.
Yeah.
And Phyllis cannot deliver a line to save her life in this movie. It's so horrible. You're right. This side plot is totally goofy. I know it's got to be just to pad out the running time.
It had to be.
And to set up the ending.
Mm-hmm.
It was the only reason. But there's nothing suspenseful about it.
No.
And so what's weird about it is then that Mike decides that he's going to go on like a second investigation of this crime that happened because he has a bad feeling, but they can't reach the house. He's going to go to a strip club.
Which, I've never been to a strip club. If they're anything like this, I don't want to go.
It's got to be the skeeziest.
It's like all these... It looked like they just like went to a truck stop and was like, do you want to come to a free strip show? Okay.
For a movie.
And all these guys who clearly probably have never acted a day in their life, and they're just acting so goofy, and this poor girl on stage is dancing, and Oh God, she's not even a good stripper.
No, she's not. She hardly even takes off her clothes.
Oh yeah, we see the other girl's boobs way more than we see the stripper's boobs.
Yeah.
But it's funny. It's like, I guess apparently she was one of the only survivors from the original massacre. And so he goes there. He goes, of course, to the strip club where she works. As she's performing to talk to her.
I guess just in case there's something that she didn't reveal way back when they investigated this case.
Right, but there's not. So the whole scene is completely pointless. There's no purpose to it whatsoever.
Oh, thank you, Candy.
Yeah.
Nice. You get a couple of jokes in, and really the point was to show 4 more boobs. Mm-hmm. That was really the whole reason.
Yep, you get Candy, and then you were telling me something about... The other one, like their main stripper, Satana McVixen, was their headliner. What were you saying about her?
She's maybe the only recognizable is kind of silly, but the only name in this film. She was a porn star from the 80s. Her name was Savannah. And she has a very brief, she just kind of comes on, takes her top off, spins around a little bit, and then she's just in the background. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think this might be her only legitimate film role. And sadly, around this time period, maybe even shortly after this movie came out, she killed herself. She committed suicide.
That's too bad.
Yeah, so she's probably the only name in this film, if you could call it that. So it's just a bizarre subplot that really is transparently silly and horrible.
And you said to set up the end, but it really didn't even need to. I mean, the cop comes in at the end, but if we had never seen him before, he would have just been some
mattered.
Cop. Right. It wouldn't have mattered.
You're right. He has no bearing on the plot at all. So Janie goes downstairs, and she's drinking her tequila. And as
she takes like 6 shots of tequila. I'm sitting there thinking, my God, if I drank that much tequila that fast, first of all, I would puke all over everything, and secondly, I'd be drunk off my ass.
Well, she did take a good 5 minutes of on-screen time to drink shots of tequila, too. Just leaning up and looking left and right, leaning up and looking left and right, looking left and right, taking another swig. It's like, get on with whatever is supposed to happen in this scene. And a gloved black hand with a hook and clearly a hooded face. Almost wrapped up like a ninja. Mm-hmm. Reaches over the counter behind her and pulls her down. And then you see, which is going to be a common theme in this film, this shadow of a hook on the wall come down and blood squirt all over the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And of course, the noise and the guilt, apparently Suzanne's guilt of sending Jamie off, she decides to get up out of bed, go downstairs, and can't find her. Not only can she not find her, but the blood's totally clean.
Yeah, this is 5 seconds later. like immediately after this girl gets killed, the other girl comes down to look for her, and she's looking around. Blood, we had just seen blood spray all over the walls. Now they're as clean as can be. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. No. Like if there was some... I don't know. I mean, later on, kind of the twist, I guess, that you see coming 400 miles away. The twist is that there is some supernatural things going on. So I guess maybe the supernatural housekeeper came over or something. I don't know, but...
It's a very tidy ghost.
It's silly.
Well, it's tidy in some ways and doesn't care in other ways, apparently. Yeah, so she goes upstairs and meets up with the other girls. And where is Janie? Oh, I don't know. She went downstairs. I looked all over.
All over the kitchen.
All over the kitchen. Didn't find her, so came back upstairs. This house that is so large that they decide to split up.
Right. Of course they do.
To go hunt it down. She apparently felt like peering in the kitchen was enough to warrant further massive investigation by the rest of the girls.
And so a couple of them go upstairs, or stay upstairs. A couple of them go downstairs. The ones that are downstairs split up.
One goes to the basement.
Right. And then I think the next one, a couple of the girls, they meet back up upstairs. The two that were looking around upstairs, and they see one door that they hadn't checked, and it ends up being the attic.
Oh,
right?
That's right.
One of them it's Suzanne, right? Goes up. She says, "I'll go up and check here." And the another one, gosh,
says,
Kim,
Kim says, "I'll just go downstairs and see if the other girls have found." They probably found Janie already, so I'll just go downstairs while you check out the attic.
Right. So Suzanne goes up into the attic and she's looking around and she steps in a bear trap because there's always bear traps laying around upstairs in an attic. And then she gets killed the same way as the first girl did.
Yeah. The killer bursts out of what appears to be a closet door in the attic that has a bunch of stuff piled up against it.
Yeah. Weird.
It is weird. There's a lot in this film that Well, you just don't want to examine it very closely. It all completely breaks down.
Yeah.
There are 15 million different holes in it.
There's no point.
No.
They're not going for some masterpiece of storytelling.
That's right. Yeah,
they're clearly not particularly concerned with that, and that's fine. Like you know that 2 minutes in.
Yeah.
So you just get over it.
This wasn't based on the best-selling novel,
Right.
Sorority House Massacre, too. So she's dead, and the rest of them apparently don't hear her screaming. You know, at times the house is supposed to be rather large, but every other evidence speaks against that to the point where you can't imagine these things would be happening in these different areas of the house. But, you know, just go with it. It's pretty par for the course, actually, for horror films. So, they go downstairs, and the rest of the girls decide to try the basement, because I believe it was Kim admits that she was too chicken to check the basement.
Right.
So they go down to the basement, I believe, and this is where they find both Janie and Suzanne hung from the rafters in a rather humorous scene.
Oh God, it's hilarious. Who's the Australian? What's her name?
She was Linda.
Linda is like kind of just standing in a corner, and you hear like a droplet of water or whatever, and it's raining outside, but she's like, oh no, leaks already. And then she looks up and blood starts dripping on her face, and we see that the two dead girls are suspended somehow. I couldn't really tell, but they're suspended up on the wall or from the ceiling or something. And she just kind of stands there screaming as the blood just kind of splashes right on her, and she, for far too long.
For effect.
Right. It's funny.
They flip out, and so they decide, they run upstairs and have this inane conversation in the kitchen.
They know that there's a killer around, and it's like they stand around deliberating for a good 30 seconds or more, and it's in this melodramatic...
Oh my God! There's no dial tone! Come now, the phone not coming till tomorrow! What are we gonna do? I mean, we can't just stay here. We've got to get out of here. Oh my God, Linda, it was so horrible. I think we'll feel a lot safer with these. I think we'll really feel a lot safer when we're a million miles from this place. Screw the rain, let's get the hell out of here. Yeah, I agree with Linda. And we've got to tell the police. I'm taking this with me. What for? For comfort. Oh my God, our clothes, they're still upstairs. You really want to go back up there? I didn't think so. Jessica's right. I think we get the hell out of here now. Come on.
Jess?
I'm gonna bring it with me. Okay.
Whatever.
And like she finds these right next to each other, just laying on the counter, these three like 9-inch like kitchen knives, and she passes them out to each of the girls, and so they each have one of these big huge knives, and they're running around in their panties.
And they run outside into the rain.
Right.
And who's there? But way across the street, Orville Ketchum, standing,
Creepy
staring
Orville
menacingly.
And he starts walking towards him, and it's really funny throughout the whole movie. Like every once in a while, we'll get a POV shot from him, and
Breathes heavy.
yeah, he's like, and so he starts walking across the street towards them, but he's like walking at the slowest pace you can possibly imagine, and he walks at that pace throughout the whole thing. It's funny, he must have emphysema or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not the breathing of a pervert or of a menacing guy. It's the breathing of
really
a guy,
fat guy
who's really fat,
Yeah.
who has a hard time putting one foot in front of the other. But because apparently he's menacing enough, walking at about a mile an hour across the street, they decide to run back into the house
After they deliberate about it again.
Oh, of course, because there needs to be enough time to get them soaking wet.
Yeah.
Which is my other charm point. I mean, if that is not bald on its face, these skimpy outfits weren't enough. About halfway through the movie, we're not going to go fully nude, but we're going to get them wet for the rest of it. So they run inside, and they kind of have a powwow in the living room where they're just sitting back to back.
I know,
in a very
it's so
staged
silly.
shot.
And like eventually, I guess Ketchum gets to the door, like he gets to the window.
Well, a line is in here, which only becomes important later, but at the time seems completely out of left field.
How could this have happened? Do you really think there's a demon in the house?
Like, what? Who said anything about a demon? Where the heck did that come from?
But yeah, Ketchum comes in.
Or he tries to get in.
Tries to get in. He's banging on the door.
Right. And we know, and of course, if logical things happen, then the movie would just be over. So logical things can't happen, but we get the picture. I still think that they kind of want us to think that maybe he's in on it or something, but it was obvious to me that he was trying to help them. But of course he couldn't say, "I'm trying to help you." He just had to stare at them slack-jawed and menacing and then like try to beat the door down.
Yeah, and I believe apparently the only thing holding the front door together is just a little chain.
Oh yeah, and this 300-pound guy can't bust it.
Break that chain.
Oh man. And then they hear a sound and they're like, he's shimmying up the drain pipe. This guy is not going to be shimmying up anything. But they have to run upstairs to make sure that they latch the window in the attic before he gets up there.
Yeah, I mean, of course, logic would dictate, well, if he is in fact shimmying up the drain pipe, then the front door is clear, why don't you run out? So they go upstairs, and they lock the windows and have a good look around the attic, apparently for the first time, or really it's the second time.
And then here, okay, I already kind of suspected what was going to happen anyway, especially since, like you said, there was that flashback scene where the girl, and we find out, of course, that it's Linda in the flashback. And in the flashback, in the very beginning, whatever it is, the scene that sets it up, she says... I know you're out there. You really hurt me. If there's an ounce of humanity left in you, you've got to remember. You've got to remember. So I kind of figured out what was going on, but then there was kind of a little throwaway line in here where they're looking around and it's like there's like a sex swing or something.
Yeah, it's like a sadomasochistic kind of setup. There are pictures on the wall of women in leather and things like that.
It was too dark for me to tell, but I could see that there were like leather straps and chains or something like that.
There's like a mannequin with nipple rings on it or something. And we make it sound worse than it really was. Honestly, it's pretty vague.
Right.
Yeah.
And then one of them says, old... I always forget his name. Old Hochstetter must have really had a good time jerking off up here or something like that. And Jesse goes, yes, he did. And I'm like, okay, weirdo. But it pretty much established that I had been right in my suspicions.
Yeah, it's real foreshadowing. It's very clever.
Yeah. Subtle.
Yeah, right? So, anyway, Jessica decides to go downstairs. Oh, one of them gets runs
scared.
Out.
Yeah,
yes.
It's Kim, right, that gets scared and runs out?
Runs out.
And she runs down the stairs and she runs in to catch him, and so she turns around and walks back up the stairs and barricades herself in a room. Meanwhile,
bathroom, right?
In a bathroom. Meanwhile, Linda is still in the attic, but Jesse said, you stay here, we know it's safe up here, you stay here, I'll go get the other one. So you know that Ketchum's kind of coming up the stairs behind Kim. She's locked herself in the bathroom, and then somebody starts pounding on the door, and somebody breaks through the door, and it's Hook guy. And again, this guy, he's like totally in all black, and like his face is covered and everything, but it's clearly not Ketchum.
Yeah.
I mean, Ketchum's this big, huge guy, and whoever this isn't big and huge.
Yeah.
And so we don't see it, but he gets in there and kills her, too.
Dispatches her, yep. So Linda's still upstairs, and who comes up the stairs but Ketchum? Mm-hmm. And so she has this great scene. I actually really like this scene in the movie where she hides, and he comes in, and he's looking around, like, supposedly menacingly, but and she lunges at him a couple times with a knife in the gut.
Oh, yeah, and she stabs him.
Seriously stabs him.
Yeah,
the
like,
knife leads
all the way
knife
to the hilt,
there. Yeah. He falls backwards and lays down. You know, it's that classic, oh, is he dead? So she walks past him, and his eyes open, and he reaches over to grab her. And so then she, as she's falling, grabs a chain off the wall, comes behind him, and strangles him, and you even hear a
cracking.
Snap.
Yeah. The blood's coming out of his mouth.
He falls down again. So, okay, she's got him. So she runs downstairs, and of course, all is quiet. Mm-hmm. Even Jess is nowhere to be found.
Right.
And so she's yelling out, I got him. Everything's okay now.
Well, and then here, another totally random thing. The phone starts ringing.
Yeah.
What? The phone doesn't work. And so she answers the phone, and whoever's on the line is like,
Is Clive Hochstetter there?
Who's this?
This is his wife. Will you put Clive on, please?
He's not here. He's not here.
I'm afraid he is, dear.
Hello?
and she hangs up the phone. And then she's still calling out for Jess, and Jess's voice from the basement is like, Linda, come down here. And so she goes down, and this is when the big, not at all surprising reveal comes.
Yes. She goes downstairs, and of course you can tell just from the voice that this is something, this is not Jess's normal voice.
Right, it's kind of ethereal, it's weird.
Mm-hmm. Jess comes out of the shadows with a hook in her hand. Now,
and she's dressed in men's clothing, and I feel like she's got her hair kind of pulled back.
Yeah, she's kind of manned up just a little bit, although she's not wearing black. She doesn't have black gloves on. That's one of the weird things about this film. That's one of the, I guess you'd say, shortcuts. If you don't have the money or the imagination to really shoot it in a creative way where you can hide the killer's identity, just throw the killer in all black.
Right.
And inexplicably, the real killer, I guess, changes in and out of it when it suits her.
See, and if I were to watch this again, this is one of the things, I had figured out already, probably, 5-10 minutes before it was revealed that she was the one who was possessed, and, we've seen this before. They did the seance, and the seance went wrong, and so the spirit was able to possess somebody. I mean, it's this ending with her, and she eventually starts talking in kind of a weird, supernatural, but male-sounding voice. Have you seen the movie Witchboard with Tawny Katane?
A long time ago.
It's the exact same ending. Tawny Katane is possessed by the spirit that came out of the Ouija board, and it's a male spirit, and she's talking in that low voice as she's dressed like a man and trying to kill her boyfriend.
That was a much better movie, as I remember.
Yeah, I liked it a lot when I was a kid. I haven't seen it in probably 15 years.
Yeah, me neither. That was one of those stupid movie night movies.
Yeah,
I remember being a little more higher caliber,
and it was actually kind of scary. It was a little scary.
Yeah,
for another time. Anyway,
yeah. What, you don't want to keep talking about this movie? So yeah, you're right. And so of course she chases her down, and you have the big showdown where they're hacking away at each other. Linda runs upstairs. She loses the knife at some point. But they're in the living room, and there's the fireplace there. So she grabs one of the pokers, and in a hilariously inept bit of choreography.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Can't manage to... I mean, she could run at Hochstetter and stab him, but she just sort of stands in place and juts out with the poker, which, of course, Melissa just steps back about half a foot to dodge every time.
Oh, the whole fight sequence is just terrible. I mean, it doesn't look real at all. It looks like... we're going to show you how to do this once, and then we're going to have you do it, and we're just going to use the first take. Yeah. However it turns out.
Even just cutting to close-ups and things just didn't cover it.
Right.
Yeah, it was bad. But in the midst of this, she falls down on her... she kind of whacks her.
Yeah.
And
they kind of whack each other, like they both go down.
Mm-hmm. And Jess falls into a pile of boxes in the corner. And doing the classic, you should never do this if you're in the situation of turning your back on the killer, Linda crawls across the floor to get to the knife. When she grabs the knife and turns around, of course... Jess is no longer there in the boxes, and so she cowers in the corner, and that is our flashback that was from before.
Right.
In the present, of course, so where she says, you've got to remember, basically saying Jess needs to remember her old
humanity,
self.
right.
Yeah. But out jumps Jess again, saying, no, Jess is gone, blah, blah, blah. And she's about to raise the hook from what appears to be halfway across the room. At Linda when Ketchum suddenly is in the background.
And this, even that first time that he kind of woke up after he had been stabbed so many times. And then she had strangled him. And then I feel like we even missed another one. Oh, she found the dead girl in the bathroom.
Oh, that's right. We missed that part.
Yeah, Linda found the dead girl in the bathroom. And when she found the girl in the bathroom, she wasn't dead yet. She, popped up out of the bloody tub, and she said... the girl's name, Suzanne, right? She says, Suzanne.
Jessica.
Jessica, whichever one is the killer.
Yes, Jessica.
She said her name.
Yep.
And then the Ketchum guy shows up in the bathroom, and she kicks the crap out of him again.
Knocks him in the nuts, bends him over, whacks him into the toilet.
Yeah, and stuffs his face out in the toilet, and you assume he drowned, or
So this poor guy has been through a lot. He's been stabbed multiple times. He still has the knife in his gut. He still has the chain around his neck. Which was supposedly snapped.
Right. This was honestly when I really... they are in on it. They know that this is a cheesy, stupid movie. They're doing it on purpose. Up until that point, I really kind of thought they were taking themselves seriously and just failing miserably.
Well, because the rest of the movie just, is of that caliber.
Well, and it's fairly typical slasher fare. It's just low rate.
Yes, it's cut rate, but again, it knows it is. And it doesn't seem to mind it.
Well, and it made me appreciate what I had seen before when I figured out that they were in on the joke. That this was meant to be a cheeseball corn fest throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so of course he is behind Jess just as she's about to skewer Linda, apparently. And he says, Hochstetter, I let you go one time, but I'm not going to do that. I wasn't man enough the first time, but I'm not going to make that mistake again. And he pulls the knife out of his own stomach and is able to stab Hochstetter, who had been a pretty effective killer up until the point where you get up and close and personal with him in a pivotal scene.
Right. Well, and again, like, he stabs her. Again, it's a huge long knife and stabs all the way into her abdomen, like, twice. And, like, she barely even flinches. Like, she just kind of stands there while he does it. And that had happened earlier, too, when the girl stepped into the bear trap. She was like, ow, ow, ooh, it hurts. Like,
your leg would probably be broken at that point. Jessica whacks him with the hook across the head and knocks him out. But as she turns around, Linda is finally able to actually move with her knife and lunges forward, and I guess that's the knife, into her neck. And I guess you got to get her in the neck, or else...
Apparently.
Yeah.
Well, and so she falls over like she's dying, but in the last second she says, Linda, in her normal voice.
Which is, I guess, supposed to make you feel sad.
Right.
Linda, you killed me. The spirit leaves my body. And it was a bit of a Bruce Campbell moment in there, too, where she stabs her in the neck and, like, blood is squirting out of the neck just all over Linda's face.
Yeah, very Sam Raimi for sure.
Oh, and they lay down together, and Linda sort of passes out, I guess. The next shot is of morning, and I guess the rain's gone, and the cops who... darn it, all night have been investigating and working their way towards this house. Storm drains must have been doing their job, and so they finally get to the house and burst open the door. A couple cops with some shotguns, and him and the mover, who's like, I got here at 5:30,
right?
And it was just like this.
I didn't touch anything, I swear.
I'm gonna be sick. And they see all the carnage, and there's a lot of head shaking, like, oh, we knew this was gonna happen. But then Linda gets up, like the spirit of Hochstetter has gone and possessed her.
Yeah, when the other girl was possessed, you could kind of see it on her face. Like, they kind of put, like, some pale makeup, kind of grayish pale, so you could tell that she was possessed or whatever. And now Linda looks like that, too. One of the cops said, isn't this the old Hochstetter place? And that's when she's, like, sleeping under a pile of boxes, and she gets up and goes, it still is. And then...
and then Ketchum wakes up.
Yeah.
Springs to life, grabs one of the cops' guns and starts shooting Linda until she falls. And then the cop wrestles himself away from Hochstetter, and the other cops turned him with their shotguns and just blast like 4 or 5 holes each into this guy. And he falls down. The detective, Mike, walks over to him and puts a finger to his neck and goes,
get an ambulance. This man is still alive.
Oh, he said, this man's still alive.
Well, and then he kind of opened his eyes, and I felt like they were kind of trying to suggest that maybe Hochstetter had jumped into him.
Yeah, it seemed like there was a suggestion, right? Because it said the end with a question mark.
With a question mark? Super funny.
You almost expected to see stars or Tweety birds spinning around his head at that point. And that was, for me anyway, again, not having known anything about this movie going in, not even the plot, imagining we were going to be watching a serious horror film, and not having these ironic kind of not... There wasn't much for horror comedy for us back in the 80s, you know? There was Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 kind of filled that void. There's a movie called Student Bodies, which was pretty over-the-top hilarious.
Right.
Whereas this one doesn't really fit into that category, you know? So, I mean, that moment came, and for me it was just like mind blown. Like, oh my gosh, they've been playing with this whole time. This movie we thought was really stupid unintentionally is clearly okay with being a silly film.
And it is funny. And then they do, like a cast montage where they're showing the actors' names and whatnot. And some of it is shots from the movie, but some of it's kind of the actors kind of wink at the camera. And then it says, it gets to the last guy, which is Ketchum, and it says, and Orville Ketchum as himself.
That's right.
And then after that first round of credits, after it introduces the main cast, then it cuts to another scene where it's a news reporter who says,
suspected mass murderer Orville Ketchum was released today from the prison ward of County General Hospital. Despite being apprehended at the scene of last month's brutal slayings of 5 teenage girls, Ketchum was freed when sheriff's detectives were unable to accumulate enough evidence to prosecute him.
And it shows him, like, sitting in a wheelchair, something in front of his house, again, just slack-jawed, maybe with a little smile on his face, and a big busty nurse just standing behind him with, like a stripper nurse uniform, not like a real nurse, and she's waving at the camera, and that's the end. And so it's obvious that, it was tongue-in-cheek all along, and if you thought otherwise, you were duped.
It's pretty funny. This movie apparently did so well for them. I don't know if it was a huge blockbuster, but apparently it made quite a bit of money. That Roger Corman, the producer, came to Jim Wynorski and said, I want you to do it again. And by that, he meant, I want you to make the same film again. So he did.
Yeah.
So there is a movie out there that you could call a spiritual sequel to this, except it's really more of a remake in a different setting, called Hard to Die.
Interesting.
Which is, if you think about it, sort of a flip on Die Hard.
Right,
Hard to Die.
And does that, this guy does that a lot now, too, like Witches of Brestwick and stuff like that.
Now it's all about sex and boobs and breasts, whereas before it was also about boobs and sex and breasts, but he had a little more interesting stuff in there. This movie, Hard to Die, is worth checking out, too. If you liked this movie just for the factor that it is exactly the same film. It follows the same plot. The same people die in the same order. It is almost all of the same actors. I think there's one actress that's different. But it is shot on a set. Roger Corman was known for taking films, finishing them early, hanging on to the actors who were still under contract and all the resources that he still had, and quickly whipping up another movie. He made a film, I don't remember the name of it, but it was supposed to be this sort of sex comedy that took place in an office building. Didn't do very well, but he still had the set left over from it. So he said, Jim, that movie worked really well. Why don't you remake it again in this office building set that I have?
Interesting.
So it makes even less sense because at least, we're fixing up a sorority house and the power's not coming on. We just want to have a fun night staying here the night. We're in an office building after hours for no really good reason. And we're going to... Oh, and also, conveniently, there's a shower in the executive's office that they can still use.
Oh, man, that's funny.
It is so rich.
That's hilarious.
I also have a bit of a confession to make. I'm so enamored with this movie that my writing partner, Dakota, and I were looking for some projects to do. And I thought, it's getting kind of popular with like the Evil Dead musical and things to take these old goofy things and turn them into musicals. I said, wouldn't it be interesting and fun to make a comedy musical based on Sorority House Massacre 2? So I emailed Jim Wynorski and I said, look, I work at a college and I have these resources. I have some ins with the theater department there, and we're thinking about maybe making a musical version of Sorority House Massacre 2. Could I do that? Could I have permission? He wrote me back.
Wow.
And he said, I think you're absolutely insane. But he said, go ahead, as long as it's right there, just kind of locally, you have my blessing. Just let me know who plays Orville Ketchum.
Interesting.
We never got around to doing it. We wrote a couple songs, and I'm pretty proud of it. In fact, we have the whole treatment down, and I think that's something we'd like to come back to sometime. So, Jim, if you're listening, there's still hope for this. Ironic horror comedies are still a big thing right now. Yeah, I have a lot of fond feelings about this film.
Well, that's cool that you got an opportunity to communicate with him. He's kind of one of your childhood heroes. That's awesome.
You know, and I might have mentioned this in the last podcast, but there's a movie out there that's a documentary about him, and it's worth checking out. He comes across as really kind of insane in the film because, again, what he's doing right now is just all getting, former strippers and models and people just parading around in the front of the camera with boobs, and it's not even very creative.
He's doing some, like, sci-fi movies, right? Like Dino Croc versus, I don't know, Anaconda or something like that.
Cobra Gator, Water Wars, Gila, Piranaconda.
Right.
I mean, all these are like made for TV or made for DVD kind of stuff. One of the things he's working on movies now. I mean, if you look at his IMDb page, this guy puts out 3 or 4 or 5 movies a year.
Huge list.
They're all pretty crappy, but apparently they're filling a void somewhere. Somebody's buying them. So I can't wait to see the Sharkensaw Women's Prison Massacre, which apparently is this year's big sleeper hit that we're going to have to look forward to. But, he comes across as a decent guy, and you can see the passion in him for making films, along with a certain level of frustration in that you feel like this guy, although he seems to have always been just interested in making goofy, fun, schlocky horror films, is frustrated by the fact that it's nowadays not as easy to sell those as it used to be. It's harder to make money from these kind of movies now. And, at that time, as you said earlier, it was just a different market. And you could get by and you could make, as long as you had the money behind you for the film and the huge resources, you could make kind of a schlocky movie that was fun. You could do what you wanted to do.
Right.
And make money from it. And now everybody with a video camera could run out and make a reasonable facsimile of a movie like this. It's a much more crowded market, and it's hard to get the funds for it. So.
Right.
But the guy's still doing it. Over 25 years in the business. It's pretty interesting.
Cool. Well, one of the things that you had mentioned before we watched the movie was that one of the things that we didn't talk about when we did Chopping Mall was the music. And frankly, I don't even really remember what the music in that was like. But because you said that, I was paying attention to the music here, and most of the movie is scored. Almost all of it. And it's actually a pretty impressive score.
Isn't it?
Yeah, the music is like surprisingly good for the level of quality of everything else.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, you're treated to an overture, really. It's not one of those where the credits are playing over action or something going. It's credits on a black screen that take a good 3 minutes, maybe. And in the meantime, you're getting like an overture.
Right.
And it even has a bit of a Danny Elfman-esque quality.
It does. It's almost got kind of a gothic feel, like there's maybe some organs or something, I don't remember. And it doesn't feel... maybe it is in part, I don't know, but it doesn't feel entirely synthetic. I mean, it sounds like pretty quality music. I was impressed with that. I don't know how impressed I was with the rest of it, but the music was good.
Well, Chuck Serino is the guy who did the music, and I actually reached out to him too, thinking that, maybe we'll incorporate some themes from it into our musical. He never did get back to me. He has a bit of a web presence, but he's a very prolific composer, again, in this genre of these older, low-budget, early 90s, late 80s kind of films, and he does a pretty competent job. Chopping Mall was also scored by him, and I thought it was pretty decent. But you're right, this movie has a very distinct sound and score.
I liked it.
Impressive.
Yeah, I'm glad that you picked this. You had mentioned it several times. I knew that it was something that you wanted to do eventually, and I was gonna. Usually, I try not to spoil movies by looking stuff up if I haven't seen them. But this one, I thought, it's just a campy thing, who cares? So I looked stuff up, and I really couldn't find much. There wasn't much to read about it, so I didn't really have any expectations or whatever, and it was fun. It's campy, it's goofy, but there's a place for that. Every once in a while you want something that's just brainless, just brainless fun, just something to sit back and watch and goof on and laugh, and I liked it, so I'm glad you picked it.
Yeah, if you're looking for a film to turn on with your friends that you want to just make fun of relentlessly from beginning to end, this is the perfect film for it.
Yeah, it's funny.
Beginning to end. And, interestingly enough, it's available on YouTube right now. I mean, probably illegally, somebody uploaded it, but I'm going to go ahead and embed it on the website so that you can go and check it out too. It's been up for several years, so maybe it'll stay up a little longer. You guys can check it out for yourself and see what you think.
Yeah.
thank you again for joining us for another episode. If you enjoyed this, please share it with a friend. Please like our page on Facebook. You can find this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. Let us know what you think. Let us know what other movies you'd like us to see. Until next week, I'm Todd.
I'm Craig.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.